So what we did this experiment again. So guys, okay, you guys have had experience with this now. You've created an assessment criteria. You've created an article. Let's do it again, okay, and see what you guys can do differently. What did you learn from this time? What are you going to apply the next time? So this is getting now into the development stage of the students' thinking. Okay, so they've created this rubric before, they created the article, and now they've assessed each other. So let's do it again, see what happens. So basically the same thing. We watched another video, did another quiz, did another article. Then we created, we had feedback circles again. Article 2, assessment criteria 2, which again we shared in terms of, you did the assessment criteria part, I'll do the article part. Then we went into the peer assessment, Article 2 and rubric 2. And then what we did, we said, okay, you guys, what we're going to do now is we're going to take the Article 1 that you did the first time and use the rubrics 2 that you created the second time and assess again to see what happens. This is as a check. But I'll go into this. Okay. This is the second rubric that they created. Okay. So they said, well, you know, we want to put in some more information. So, for example, you've got now graphs. So they've got the elements, all the elements, and then decided, well, we're going to make it from 1 to 0 to 4, and there's going to be a reason why we're going to give it 4, and there's going to be a reason why we're going to give it 2. So now there's more information in the rubrics. Again, this is, we didn't prompt them anything. This is, guys, go ahead. What did you learn? So the students came up with this whole chart. And actually what we did in class was we put them in groups, and they created this assessment criteria groups, and then they voted on the best one, and that's the one that we used. Okay? So there's ones that weren't as good as this, but the students chose this one to use because they thought it was the most thorough and the most detailed. And you can see conclusion, very short writing, no opinion, long grammar, no consciousness. Many writing explained very clearly, right grammar, good opinion, good contents. So there's all kinds of detail in this assessment criteria that the students came up with. And so when
Just very quickly, so the teacher's not intervening at all, in any sort of guidance or feedback, whatever they decide, that's it.
We decided to do that because we wanted to not influence the students how they thought they should be assessed. And I think this is really important because it gives the students a sense of, you know, when they get into the real world and they're doing their job, how they're going to be able to think about, okay, if I'm going to do something for my boss or for the market or for anybody, how should I approach it? So it gives them that kind of starting to think about how to self-evaluate or things that they should look at in terms of what they should be doing in their own work.
They didn't also get their results from their peers, did they? No. So it wasn't result driven.
Okay. Yeah.
So an important aspect of this that we discussed was whether or not we should show them the results that their peers had given them for their article. And we didn't give them any results because we didn't want this to be result driven. We didn't want them to focus on trying to improve a result, or if they thought they got a good result, then the next time around they're going to get a good result again. So keeping away from it being result driven, we wanted them to focus on the activity itself. And in this case, in the class when we presented the second stage, we did give them 10-15 minutes in their groups to share their experiences and talk about what they did before we actually started the activity. And in that discussion group, they were actually collaborating, sharing their ideas and telling each other what they thought about the activity. And I think that really stepped in well to creating this second.
In the second rubric, you rearranged the groups again. So they were pulling ideas from groups that were from, or students from previously different groups before.
No.
The groups were the same.
Oh, groups were the same. For the feedback circles and the collaboration work that they did together, we kept them in the same groups because we thought if they got to know each other and they got used to working with each other, then that would benefit the second stage.
The other thing too was, one of the questions that we asked in the survey was, do students study only for the test? And the initial part was yes. And then at the end of this, a lot of the answers were no, we don't study only for the test. This is actually a good way to study. And we learned a lot more through this than we have studying for a test. So this gave them a lot of experience. Okay, this is the formative assessment peer-peer. So basically, they put the article on the screen. We try to keep the classroom as paperless as possible. 1 minute from each, 1 minute total for how much you did this.
I decided that we needed some type of structure to gain momentum in discussion in groups. So basically allocating 3 minutes. The first time they look at a student's article on the computer screen. So we've got access to computer labs, so this class is being taught in a computer lab. So they look at each other's screen. In the first minute we decided that they would just respond and give positive feedback what they liked about that person's article. Then after that first minute, and in the early stages, I would time and say, okay guys, that's 1 minute time, change. Go to making suggestions. They'd go in and make some suggestions about how they could possibly improve the article for that person, and then that closed with the discussion. So the person whose article they were talking about, they could ask questions, follow up with some of the ideas that they said, but each person only had 3 minutes for their own article. So by creating something like this, it was one, to get everyone's able to get feedback in a 90-minute class with other activities going on, but also it was something that we could reuse over and over again, and it was a short activity, but we thought it could provide them with a lot of information.
This is an example of some peer feedback. So they're standing at the computer screen and then looking at each other. Okay, so now, if we look at the same article, and again, we took the initial article that they had created, and we did the second rubrics that they had created. Okay, so there's 3 stages. One is Article 1 and Assessment Criteria 1. Next one is Article 2, Assessment Criteria 2. And the third one was a check, and it was Article 1 and Assessment Criteria 2. So we wanted to see how good the second rubric was on the first article that they had made. And you can see it's much different in terms of what the feedback is. And you can see that good, easy to understand, good quality, good arrangement, clear striking, good contents and example, good question, conclusion, easy to understand, main point. So this matches what the article is showing. So they're a really good match. The students had a good idea when they saw this article what the rubric's matching point was. So that it wasn't 1, 0, 1, 2, 3 anymore. It was use different font, underline, good frame, easy to understand, good design. That's what this article is. So there was a better match in terms of what grade they got as a result of the choices that were available. Okay? And this point here is where it's really important, because in this assessment rubrics, it's all qualitative. So they have no idea what score to give them, because it's all based on the qualitative aspect of what the article has versus what the rubric is offering for choices in terms of the level. And again, this is the same thing, the article. So a few pictures, hard to see, thin relation, so writing, few pictures, good content, easy to see, no circulation line. So this, again, is the same, a different article, but you can see that this assessment criteria that was given to this article is also a good match. Okay, so the students are really aware of what they're doing. Okay, now this is Article 2 and Rubric 2, so you can see the marks were almost the same. This one is a little bit less than 40, and up to 75 or 76. So there's still that range of marks that they were being given to their peers, but now there's a larger spread in terms of what the students are being given for their assessment grade. And the reason is because there's more choices. There's a lot. It's not 0, 1, 2, 3 anymore. It's is a good picture, or maybe it's a little bit better picture. There's more of a spread of choices for the students to make. Okay. And we can adjust how this outcome comes based on how strict we want to be with their assessment, which I'll go into a little bit later. But you can see that this is a much more effective rubric, because as I've had discussions with other teachers about this kind of thing, is maybe as a teacher I'm looking for something like in a speech the quality of the voice, and whereas someone else will content or will focus on the PowerPoint presentation. So there's two different opinions that are happening for the same presentation. So maybe someone will give a bad mark for the PowerPoint and a good mark for the voice, while the other person might say, well, I want a bad mark for the voice and I want a good mark for the PowerPoint presentation, or a good mark for both. So there's those kind of choices that the students can make now, because they think, well, the focus should be on the text, so they really look at the text, whereas somebody else might say, well, the layout is very important, so they focus on the layout. So the marks will differ based on the students' own opinions of how they feel the article should be assessed. Does that make sense? That was our discussion. And now you can see this is Article 1. Again, back to Article 1, and now Rubric 2. So you can see that Rubric 2 is much more effective for Article 1 too. So this was our check to see if it was not the article initially, but it was the rubric. So you can see that the Rubric 2 is being used to assess the Article 1, and there's still a large spread in terms of how the students assess each other. Okay. So this is just a comparison. So here they had not much choice in the 0, 1, 2, 3. So let's give them all 2s. Everybody was the same. Here we have different opinions in terms of how well or what they wanted to focus on. Different 0, 1, 2, 3, 4. So they had 5 choices this time, and it was all the quality of assessment. And again, same thing for Article 1 and 2. Are there any questions up until now?
I'm just curious about the level of English. Are they all speaking in English for this whole workshop, the students? Do you let them use a little bit of Japanese and so on?
Yeah, we let them use Japanese because for some of the feedback that they're giving, of course, when they're writing the article and when they're creating the assessment criteria, the language is mostly English because they have to focus on writing in English. But when it comes to the feedback, it goes.
Yeah. Certainly in the early stages, in the first few lessons. So this class is taught twice a week. Mark's on Tuesday and I'm on Wednesday. So we kind of just govern how much Japanese they actually need just to get used to the activities themselves. And then what I start doing in my classes is say, okay, look, for the first 30 minutes today, you're not able to use any Japanese at all. But what I will do is I'll give you 2-3 minutes follow-up on something, and if you do need to quickly correspond with each other and say something in Japanese, I'll allow you to do that. But certainly in the in-language stages, where they're using the article language, using the criteria language, we don't let them use any Japanese.
What's the duration between these 3 events?
8 lessons.
Yeah, so
4 weeks.
Yes.
At any stage do they get to assess articles without a rubric? It's been told to just look and decide if it's good or bad without having any conscious criteria. To be interested, be an interesting comparison to see how much difference it made having the assessment criteria. If you had just sent them in and just said, rank them from best to worst, would that have come out differently from actually having these detailed criteria to use?
In the early stages, we were saying how much should we tell them, what kind of prompt should we make. We decided not to give them any prompting. And I would say maybe half the class in the beginning were making the article, and in my class, and then in my class making the rubrics, half the class did not connect the two together. Okay? And so to answer your question, there were students in the early stages, especially for the first workshop, that were not building the article for the rubrics or vice versa. But some of the smarter students started to key onto it, and you can see some of the groups on one student's computer, you can see their article, and one student's computer, you see their rubric. So they're thinking about the concept of putting the two together, but certainly in the second workshop, everyone's looking at their articles, looking at their rubrics, and really trying to connect the process.
But the other point of that was I looked at the grades for the first article and the first rubrics, and the grades for the first article and the second rubrics, and the marks were almost they were not almost identical in terms of score, like 64 versus 68, but they were identical in terms of the order of. So this person who had the high grade before got the same, was still at the top. This person who had the bottom before was still at the bottom. in between, and was still the almost identical spread.
Yeah, so I'm just curious about if that was still the same, if they were doing it with no rubric at all. Would you be interested in making it still the same?
But I don't think it would, I wouldn't think it would be different based on what we results here. Yes?
I was wondering, were students allowed to evaluate their own work?
No.
I was wondering if, maybe a future one, if they could, if you go through the whole thing, then they evaluate, after they go through the whole process of learning how to assess work, if they could go back and assess their own work and correlate that to other students' assessment and see if they could critically, objectively judge their own work.
Well, interesting point, because the next, we did another research thing on this, same class, where they did video stuff. And that's how they were able to assess their own videos and assess their own presentations. And a lot of them redid their entire presentation based on what they saw on video.
But we were thinking about it during this whole process too. If we could fit in here as their own self-assessment. It wasn't just
This,
yeah. Anything goes to the
Students do any rewriting of Article 1 before
no.
the assessment report?
No, the Article 1 stayed as it was. Now all we wanted to see was the difference between rubrics 1 and rubrics